Coming up next, The Crunch with Cam Slater. Conversations with a side of controversy. Every Thursday from 4 p.m, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.
Good afternoon and welcome to The Crunch on Reality Check Radio. I'm your host, Cam Slater, and this is the place we crunch the political issues and cut through the politician's spin. We're back on our usual slot after an early morning sojourn last week, and I've got to say it's good to be back, even though I never left. This afternoon, we're going to chat with Dr. Marewa Glover to talk about tobacco control policies and where New Zealand is leading the world and where we need to improve. My final guest for the day will be the brilliant Olivia Pierson, delivering another of her views. Naturally, we will hear from Cam's buddies and see what they have to say about the Olympic opening ceremony. And of course, we'll have the whale bag to get your feedback too. Don't forget to send comments to inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057. Today, I'm going to talk about a phenomenon that seems to be sweeping through the Green Party, political entropy. Now, what do we mean by this term and how does it manifest itself in the context of New Zealand politics and the Green Party? Well, let's break it down for you. Political entropy, in essence, refers to the gradual decline of order and predictability within a political entity. It's akin to the concept of entropy in physics, where systems naturally progress from a state of order to disorder. In political terms, this means that a party or organisation becomes increasingly fragmented, disorganised, and less effective over time. This process can be driven by internal conflicts, leadership struggles, ideological divides, or a failure to adapt to changing circumstances, all of which occurs and is occurring inside the Green Party. And indeed, every political party goes through a period of time of political entropy. But let's turn our attention to the Green Party. Historically, the Greens have been a beacon of woke, progressive values, advocating for environmental sustainability, social justice, and economic equality. Their rise in New Zealand politics was marked by a cohesive vision and a united front. However, recent events suggest that this unity is fracturing and is revealing signs of political entropy. Infighting within the Green Party has become increasingly public and acrimonious. Leadership disputes, policy disagreements, and strategic misalignments are now front and centre. And the Darlene Tana episode has fractured it even further. Members are now publicly airing their grievances, and the party's once clear vision seems clouded by internal discord. This turmoil is not just a series of isolated incidents. It's indicative of a deeper systemic issue, political entropy. So what does this mean for the Green Party and New Zealand politics as a whole? Well, first, the effectiveness of the Green Party is at stake. When a party is consumed by internal conflict, its ability to present a united front on policy issues diminishes. We saw this happen with the National Party in the 2017 election. This fragmentation weakens their bargaining power in coalitions and undermines their credibility with voters. Second, political entropy within the Greens could impact New Zealand's broader political landscape. The Green Party has played a crucial role in shaping woke progressive policies and pushing each government, whether it's national-led or Labour-led, towards a more sustainable and equitable solutions in their minds. If their influence wanes, there could be a vacuum in the political arena, leading to a potential shift in policy directions. If the Greens fracture, they could turn into Green Greens. You could have LGBT Greens. You could have a whole lot of them shift to the Maori Party and a whole lot of them shift to the Labour Party. Third, this infighting provides a cautionary tale for all political entities. It highlights the importance of maintaining internal cohesion, clear communication, and a shared vision. And without those elements, even the most well-intentioned parties can fall victims to the forces of political entropy. So in conclusion, the Green Party's current struggles are more than just a bump in the road. They're a clear sign of political entropy. This decline in order and predictability within the party threatens their effectiveness and influence in New Zealand politics. And as observers and participants in the political process, it's essential to recognise these signs and understand the implications. The hope for the Greens is that they can address these issues, restore the unity, and continue to champion the causes that resonate with their mostly female supporters. But until then, the rest of us, we watch, we wait, mindful of the lessons that political entropy teaches us about the fragility of political organisations, and mostly enjoy the popcorn.
You're listening to The Crunch with Cam Slater, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.
Dr. Marewa Glover has been at the forefront of tobacco policy for more than 30 years. She is undeniably a world-class expert on the topic. And with it being in the news a lot at the moment, I thought we'd get her along to help you all understand the forces at play regarding tobacco control. She's also been cancelled because she refuses to follow groupthink and has contrarian views on the issue. Let's talk with Dr. Glover now and find out her views on what is going on in the industry and what policies we should be pursuing to get New Zealand smoke-free. Dr. Marewa Glover, welcome to The Crunch. How are you this afternoon?
Great. The sun has just come out, and that makes everything better, doesn't it?
It always does. Now, you're one of New Zealand's. I'm trying to work out a suitable explanation, because it's a very warped world that you operate in. In talking about smoking cessation and the research around all of tobacco products and tobacco marketing and smoking cessation, all seems a bit emotive. But you're one of the people who spends an awful lot, in fact, all of your time researching this. Yes,
and for such a long time now, 31 years. And so...
Well, expert's a good word then, isn't it?
Yes.
Studying something.
That's right.
Bradwell would say you've done more than your 10,000 hours, and therefore you're an expert.
Thank you. I certainly have done more than 10,000 hours, and feel like I've done more than that just in the last year. There's a lot to do, and we're unfortunately, it's just become so contested, such a vicious field. And when I started, it was all about reducing death and disease, and that was the focus. And it's completely shifted away from that, very similar to many other issues with the culture war and wokeism and all sorts of other stuff coming into it. It's just so disappointing to have been at the forefront of tobacco control, of reducing smoking in New Zealand, and to see what the sector has dissolved into.
Well, I've been watching it for quite some time. I took an interest back in my old whale oil days at what seemed to be a group of people that were activists rather than scientists, and were using emotive and erroneous studies to push an agenda which seemed to be for total prohibition. And I can recall even giving evidence once at a select committee, and was roundly abused by Shane Bradbrook, who was sitting behind me, Hone Harawira, who was an MP at the time, sitting in front of me. And I was pointing out that after 10 years of all these smoking cessation programs, this is about 10 years ago, so it's dated since then. We've had the advent of, vaping and all those sorts of things. And I was pointing out that in 10 years of smoking cessation efforts and the expenditure of hundreds of millions of dollars, that there was still the same number of smokers as there were 10 years ago.
Yes, we did have a plateau. So there was initial reduction in smoking prevalence in New Zealand from its peak. Its peak was like in the mid 1960s, and then the US Surgeon General's report came out in 1964, was broadcast globally. And those people who actually had a black and white TV then, I think they were black and white, got to get the message about smoking kills, and we began to see then a reduction, very slow. People began to give up for health reasons, those that could. And another paper that a colleague and I have produced modeled, like, if that kept going, and the old adage that if parents smoke, children are more likely to smoke, and if someone quits, then you're more likely to quit. We modeled that, and actually that initial kind of shock of that knowledge coming out explains all of the reduction in the following years up until pre-vaping, as we went up to vaping. So it's very interesting perspective, because modelling is very respected, especially if you think back to COVID and the modelling that happened. And, we don't have to get into what is the weaknesses of modelling, but that initial knowledge is what people need. They need facts, they need the truth, and that needs to be based on robust, good scientific evidence. And they need support, if that's what they want, to do. If it is harming them and they don't want that, then they need to have that option there. It's not forcing everybody into it. It's, you've got to work with people.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was sitting there watching successive governments. It didn't matter which government was in. They were hell-bent on increasing taxation for cigarettes. And I went to a conference on smoking cessation in Singapore, and I learned some very interesting stuff there. I think it was about 2012. So it's, 12 years ago, again, before vaping. And they talked about Bhutan and how Bhutan is tried taxing cigarettes out of existence. And it got to a certain point where it became lucrative for criminal gangs to sell illegal cigarettes because the taxation was so high. And I warned the select committee back then that, and I even said to them, look, if you want a 40-foot container of illegal cigarettes delivered here, you just got to give me $50,000 in cash and I'll have it here in 2 hours. And they just laughed at me, and they couldn't believe that it could happen. But it does happen, and it is happening. But we've seen successive governments slap on taxes on top of on tobacco, on excise, increasing it every year almost. And we're at now a point where we're seeing dairies and supermarkets and service stations being robbed for cigarettes. It's the Bhutan situation all over again, and I can't believe we fell into that.
Yes, it's the global tobacco control sector continue to say that taxation is the most effective lever to get people to stop smoking. I think that you have to be very brave to challenge sort of ideas that, they kind of hold them up. If you disagree, then watch out, you're probably gone, which I found out because I disagreed. I said that's enough tax. And this is going back 13, 14 years. I could see through the studies I was doing with Māori low income, with young pregnant mums, and through other research I did on obesity, that the price of cigarettes was causing people to, they spend it there, they don't have it then to spend on food, on healthy food. They can still buy fish and chips, or big pile of, fish and chips, and everyone will be happy. But the taxation was beginning to harm the level of that's coming out of people's pockets. So I put my hand up. I'm like, no, that's enough. This needs to stop. Thankfully, the Ministry of Health did do commission an evaluation, and they I think it was EY went out. They came back and they said the same thing. Yep, this is definitely harming people, and that's when, I guess, around about the time that the Labor government got in, Labor New Zealand First coalition, and they stopped the tax for a while. You still have the CPI and annual inflation adjustment, but I see the tax is going to go back on again.
Well, politicians are addicted to tax. I said to the select committee at the time, if you guys were serious about tobacco cessation or cigarette smoking cessation, New Zealand's a very small country. You could make it illegal right now. We've got pretty strong borders. You need a boat to get here. It would be pretty easy to shut everything down. There's no land routes that people can get around customs or whatever. You have to be very determined to get stuff in. Yes, there would still stuff be getting in, but if they were serious about it, instead of taxing people, something like, I think it was back then, it was about $1.4 billion. It's more than that per annum now. And that would, if it was about health, they'd do that. And not one of them said anything. They had no answer.
That's kind of a breach of human rights, though. It's I don't agree with prohibition. I don't agree with just banning something. And there still would be a black market. I mean, Australia is a very good, we're getting plenty of evidence over there because they've banned, e-cigarettes. If you want to vape, you've got to go to the pharmacy and you've got to get a prescription. Oh, you don't need a prescription anymore, but you've got to go to the pharmacy. The pharmacies don't even want to sell them. So the black market ballooned, as I warned, as you warned, as many people warned, and then that's another study I've done in the last 5 years was an analysis of the ram raids of shops. These things create other health problems. So there were 100 injuries in the numerous media articles that I read about the ram raids. And 100 people had been injured physically, let alone psychologically. Two men, I think, had lost an eye. Others had been slashed up their arm with a machete. And there was a young Māori boy who was involved in robberies, drove up the motorway the wrong way, got chased, ended up slamming into a pole and dying. And then, of course, we had a retailer murdered, killed. And so policy analysis, you have to look at the potential negative consequences. And if you're going to do something that just creates other harms in another area of public health, that's inappropriate, and you have to balance everything out.
Prohibition's never worked anywhere in the world, has it, on anything? Whether it's drugs or alcohol or cigarettes, it's never worked.
So smoking was banned in our prisons. That's some time ago now as well. And I guess everyone would go, well, it wouldn't work there either. They made it quite different from other prisons who had tried this around the world. In New Zealand, you're not allowed to take tobacco onto the whole premises, not even the staff, and right. No visitors either. Nobody's allowed to take tobacco on there. I knew the person who did the initial evaluation, and they had to sort of take some stuff out. They said, well, if that's the case, I'll take my name off it as well. So we don't get to hear the real story. I have some research participants in my current study who have been in there and come out, and there's been some very interesting stories from people who have actually been in prison and what's going on. The creative things they can do with a patch, which I won't go into for the sake of the public's ear.
There's many creative things that they can do, but the fact is that all sorts of contraband gets smuggled into prisons, and tobacco would be no exception to that. I mean, they already smuggle cannabis in there. They already smuggle methamphetamine in there, even smuggle cell phones in. So if you can smuggle a cell phone in, you can smuggle in some loose leaf tobacco, can't you?
Yeah, and yes, there was that lawyer that was visiting. I got involved with someone in prison, and she smuggled in tobacco, got caught. Do you remember that story anyway?
Her first name was Davina, if I remember correctly.
So it's, stories like that, we know what you're saying is right.
So prohibition doesn't work, but after the 2020 election, when Labor were a majority government and didn't have Winston Peters sitting there providing a handbrake, they pretty much went full on prohibition, but in a sneaky kind of ways. They talked about having an age ban, talked about something that doesn't even exist, that they were going to force on the entire world somehow. This little old New Zealand, a small country that has a very small numbers for anything that we do, rounding figures basically for large corporates. But they were suggesting that tobacco companies be forced to sell denicotinized or low nicotine tobacco, which doesn't exist. And somehow they were going to enforce that. And then the stupidity of trying to reduce retailers down to around 600 across the whole of New Zealand.
Yes, that was pretty shocking. So those policies have been talked about in New Zealand tobacco control and, for quite some time. I mean, it's kind of like, brainstorm and throw up any idea, no matter how extreme, no matter how weird. And those ideas were there, but they were seen by many people as, no, that's really extreme. That isn't pragmatic. It's never going to happen. When we had Ayesha Varel, who came from University of Otago into Parliament, they had one of their own in there then, and she became Associate Minister of Health. And that actually had been talked about as a strategy as well, that we need to get our own people into Parliament. So there's all these strategies, lobbying, advocacy strategies, how do we manipulate politicians that have been talked about within the sector for a long time. There's a lot of strategizing that goes on rather than actually going out and helping people stop smoking.
Isn't that what they accuse Big Tobacco of doing?
Oh, well, we learned so much from Big Tobacco. We learned, tobacco control, the ones that spend a lot of their time just doing lobbying rather than, as I said, helping people stop smoking. We've learned all of that from Big Tobacco. And it just does my head in that now I'm seeing that the sector that I've worked in for so long have adopted many of those old strategies that were wrongly used by, big companies lobbying government and bribing and, giving payments or whatever. And here's tobacco control doing many of the same thing. Using communication, it's propaganda basically, that manipulating the public perception, putting misinformation out there, which is like, this is why many people are not watching, mainstream media anymore, right? Because you can't believe anything they say. There's so much false information, fake information, and very cleverly worded, rhetoric. And that's what tobacco control went more for and have, they've...
It's interesting because you talk about the mainstream narrative out there. And just this week we've seen Radio New Zealand via Guy and Espiner attack on Casey Costello, the minister, with some fanciful numbers. I don't know if you've seen that, but they're suggesting that that the government set aside $216 million as a fund to cover tobacco tax cuts. And we're talking about the tax cuts on heated tobacco products. And if you analyse those Treasury numbers, and clearly Guy and Espiner didn't, he just ran with the headline that there's this $216 million fund to cover tobacco tax cuts. But I don't know how you're supposed to cover tax cuts. Tax cuts are taking less money, you don't need to fund it. But anyway, that's another argument. But it was this fanciful number, 216 million. And what Treasury's assumed is that there's 6,000 existing users of heated tobacco products. That will only increase by 1,200 to 7,200. But in order for those numbers to work for Treasury, that means that those 7,200 users of heated tobacco products would now have to buy 3,805 packets of 20 heats per user, right, per annum, and then use 209 of those a day.
Yeah, I saw that cabinet paper, and I think that, some of the money that's set aside is actually to pay the Ministry of Health for the work that they, so it's their budget to work on this policy. And they said that,
saying that they were going to lobby the government and come up with reports that had Jimmy numbers in it to justify them telling the government not to do this because it would be cheaper just to keep the tax in place.
Yeah, it's disgusting, the breakdown in both universities, academia, and in the ministries, the government ministries, as Liz Truss in the UK calls it or talks about it in her book, the blob. Officials now run everything, and they have such a low opinion of politicians, of people who get into Parliament, MPs, and the disgusting attacks on Karen Shaw yesterday or in that select committee. I mean, this is across the board.
You've been subject to those attacks as well because you don't sing from the same song sheet.
That's right. Yes, it really changed probably about 15 years ago to this new strategy of discrediting people, putting out misinformation about them, manipulating people's perceptions of you. It felt like my identity had been stolen, and then they just lie. They just defame you. They lie. They gossip. It's so unprofessional. It's so unethical, and it frightens everyone. Somebody said to me recently that you've got to be careful in New Zealand because if you say the wrong thing, you'll get marewa'd, So it has a chilling effect. Again, another strategy we learned from the big tobacco companies. The chilling effect is if anyone who works in public health happens to say anything in support of these greatly risk-reduced products that thankfully the new government are supporting, and that, the approach of the new government is we're going to get to 5%, and
we're almost there now.
We are almost there. It really has completely exceeded my expectations, and we've mainly had people switching to vaping or they switched to both smoking and vaping and then to vaping. And, whether they quit or not, I'm not really that concerned about that. Again, I'd get marewa'd for that. But what we need to focus on is that it is smoke that kills. If you're not smoking, I'm cool with that. Let's move on to the next major disease, predominant disease that is causing harm. We shouldn't be wasting taxpayer dollars chasing down something that the harm is way, way down the list of priorities.
If you look at it too, the numbers of people smoking now, I mean, I gave that when I was giving evidence to the select committee, I think there was about 750,000 smokers back then. That was 2012. That seems about right, doesn't it?
Yep.
Now I'm told the numbers are something like 290,000.
Yeah.
A significant drop.
Yeah.
Very short amount of time. And it hasn't been done because of taxation, has it? It's been done because there's alternatives that are less harmful than cigarettes. So people are moving from cigarettes to vaping, or patches or gum or whatever you choose to use to get off smoking cigarettes. And therefore, there's much less harm happening, much less impost on the health system. And yet these public health advocates like, Dr. Jude Ball, for example, from the University of Otago, are implacably opposed to even like nicotine pouches.
Yes.
They want to have those, instead of being legalized and freely available for people to stop smoking altogether and to wean themselves off nicotine by using these pouches. Like, there's various different brands out there, but the largest brand is Zyn. There's also Snooze as well. They're opposed to all of these. And I'm struggling to understand why. Why are they opposed to these? I mean, you don't get cancer from nicotine, do you?
No, you don't. It's, there's lots of discussion about what are the motivations behind these, mainly academics who are saying these things. And there are multiple motivations. Some of them, they're in it for the money, the gravy train of just, continuing to have to treat cancer and research smoking-related diseases and the problem of people smoking. Oh, what are we going to do? Some of them, they have religious beliefs. The body's a temple. You shouldn't put anything into it. Some of them, it's the ideology is even worse, and there are crossovers across a number of topics that you cover on your show. There are people in public health who believe that everybody should do what they say because the public generally are dumb. They honestly have very low respect for the public. They haven't done what I've told them to do. They're hurting themselves. And I'm going to tell them, this is how you have to live. And then you won't get these diseases anymore. And you're to do what I say or else. And there are people in there that are quite extreme.
One of those who I've danced in a courtroom with is Professor Boyd Swinburne. And he was a anti-smoking person to start with. Then he moved into nutrition and health. And now he's out there advocating for every tax he can think of around taxes on soft drinks, taxes on sugar, taxes. All he ever talks about is tax. It's like it's the only thing he knows. Doesn't actually address some of the other things that are out there, like, if I'd been given a chance, I would have said to him, well, hang on a second, you want to tax nicotine products. There's nothing wrong with nicotine. Nicotine helped me recover from a stroke. Everyone says to me, what do you mean, Cam? And I said, well, when I was in hospital after my stroke, I researched what causes strokes. And the largest cause of stroke it's a combination of things. But if you have a lack of neuroplasticity, then the increased blood pressure just causes those blood vessels to fracture and break, which causes the stroke. So I thought to myself, well, how do you increase neuroplasticity? Well, the single thing that has the biggest impact on positive outcomes for neuroplasticity is nicotine. So I was lying there in the hospital going, well, where am I going to get some nicotine? I don't like cigarette smoking. I hate it. Patches just seemed a bit gay. So I thought, well, I know, I'll start smoking cigars because you don't actually smoke cigars. And there's as much nicotine in one cigar as there is in a packet of cigarettes. So I just started smoking one cigar a day. And then guess what? I found that the FDA in the United States has released several reports, peer-reviewed reports, saying that smoking 1 to 2 cigars a day has negative health effects.
Well, the effect of smoking cigarettes or tobacco, there's a dose response. The more you smoke, the greater the risk. The earlier you start, the more you smoke, the longer you smoke, the greater the risk. So, historically in tobacco control, that kind of message was too complicated to put out to the public. They might go, oh, well, if I only smoke a little bit, then that's, I'm at less risk. Oh, no, we can't have that. So it just became just tell people it kills. And across all communications, we had to just sort of hide the fact there's this dose response. So people who smoke more are at greater risk. And people don't tend to smoke cigars, as frequently. Not 20 a day, right?
Well, no, because
not inhaled.
So you're not going to smoke 20 a day at $50 each. You're just not.
Well, I guess it's that sort of, some things are a luxury good. But getting back to what you were saying about the heated tobacco product and vaping, vaping has turned out to be an almost perfect substitute. It's like, this has happened many, many times before with many products where people were using something, a new product comes along. It's almost like, the camera and the mobile phones. It's you can take photos on, what was it, digital, So it's in technological innovation. There's been a lot of product development, obviously, and the early ones, didn't work for everyone. And now the situation we have now is governments and states in the US, they're fiddling around with regulating this thing or that product characteristic or this product characteristic. And they are destroying one of the things that made it an effective substitute. So if you take flavors away, you take away one of the characteristics of the product that has helped people to completely substitute.
Disgusting, right? I mean, they do. They taste horrible. So if you've got an option to get a nicotine hit and it tastes like strawberry, you're going to take that, aren't you, over sucking on a cigarette?
Well, there's a lot of people especially initially, I mean, it is important to have a tobacco-flavored vape e-liquid as well, because the current study I'm writing up, one of the barriers is that it's just too distant for many people, especially older people who have smoked for, over 40 years. And this new innovative product and then the flavors, it's just too foreign. Yeah. So there's got to be a bridge. There's got to be something that's not so foreign. The other thing that really helped was it still had the hand-to-mouth movement. It actually still had the performative aspect. What I mean by that is the blowing out, a cloud. So there were so many similar things, characteristics and experiences, and so it really worked. We had this mass exodus of people around the world switching without any encouragement. And New Zealand is very different because the government encourages people who smoke to switch to vaping. In many countries, there's no encouragement. In fact,
or it's hostile.
It's hostile, like Australia, which is going very extreme. And still, you can't stop humanity from understanding this is known to be harmful. I've seen it in my own whānau family. I've seen people die of smoking-related diseases. This is known to be 95% safer. Okay, that's a fairly logical, common sense thing to do then, isn't it? So
there doesn't seem to be any logic. I mean, you mentioned Australia and you've got to get it from a pharmacy, which is highly ironic because when cigarettes first started coming around, you had to get them prescribed and get them from a pharmacy.
Really?
Yeah, I've seen it in museums, packets of cigarettes, inhale this to assist with your asthma.
Oh, yes, yeah.
That sort of stuff. So, it was medically prescribed. And so now you've got vaping, but that's not working though, is it?
No. And, strangely, they didn't seem to have consulted with that pharmacy guild, and they don't want to stock vaping products. They don't want to, that we had ram raids and violent robberies. Australia, they're firebombing the stores. And it's just astounding. The level of crime over there that has occurred is far greater than what, there have been more people killed. And it's just, I think the officials who advise MPs, I think that whole system needs to be carefully transitioned to evidence-based.
Yeah.
And also, it's like they don't understand what it means to be a public servant. They're in there pushing their own ideologies, whether they back Greens or they back Labour or they back National. I saw it when I worked for the Public Health Commission. If there's a change of government, you get this ripple down from the top. So the top person will be replaced by the latest government's person that they want in, and then people will be, I don't support that government, so they'll go get another job, or they're moved out. So every time we get a change of government, there's this ripple of turnover in staff and people in there and experts. We lose expertise, and now it's just free for all. In corporations and businesses and government agencies, it's just free for all. You push your own ideology. They're lobbying, like you said. They're producing false information and writing it in such a way to manipulate a new MP. The reason that University of Otago, who pushed those denicotinization, age ban, and retailer licensing programs for years, decades, they pushed those things. And how did they get them in? Because you've got a new government, they've got a majority, and a lot of them are newbies. They've never been an MP before.
I invited Janet Hoke onto this show to talk about this sort of thing, just refused flat out. I said, well, hang on, you're a public health advocate. I want to talk about this. I want to explore your evidence on these statements that you're making. She didn't want to talk about it.
A public servant, academics have a duty to respond to requests like that.
There's a number of countries around the world that have had different approaches. We've just talked about Australia, and their approach really isn't working at all. Two countries come to mind in my research on this. Sweden is one of them, and you've recently released a report comparing Sweden with New Zealand. We'll talk about that in a minute. Before we talk about Sweden, I want to talk about Japan, right? Because in Japan, my father was involved in business around Asia an awful lot. So as a young person, I was brought up having Japanese businessmen come to our house, or Korean businessmen, and those two countries in particular had a high incidence of cigarette smoking. That's my memory of every Japanese person who came and stayed at our place would prodigiously smoke.
Men, right? Men.
Yeah, prodigiously smoke. And so they've got an endemic situation with cigarette smoking in Japan. And in fact, one of the biggest tobacco companies in the world is in Japan, right?
It's owned by the Japanese government.
That's right. But they introduced heated products, which is what Guy and Espiner is all heated about. And as a result, from my research, and you're the expert, so you correct me if I'm wrong here, but it appears they've had a third cut in cigarette sales in 3 years. 3 years.
Yeah, it's actually heated tobacco products have been on sale. They're a little bit longer than that. They're down 40%.
40%.
So, yeah, it's substitute the market now. 40% of people who were smoking have gone to the heated tobacco product. This is also a product that is legal in New Zealand, but nobody knows about it in New Zealand because advertising of tobacco products is banned. Oh. So we've actually had it here as well. The Ministry of Health tried to say that it was illegal took Philip Morris to court for selling the heat sticks, and Judge Butler threw the case out. He said, but this is a product that reduces harm, is a reduced harm product. This goes against the whole purpose of the Smoke-Free Environments Act, which is to reduce harm. So that was a milestone case, and it led to the next amendment to the Smoke-Free Environments Act, changing the purpose of the Smoke-Free Environments Act. So that's what they do. If they, don't like that, well, we'll change the law. But yes, so heated tobacco products have been for sale here, but no advertising. Vaping is the one everybody knows about. I only just saw the first person I've seen in New Zealand using a heated tobacco product just this week or last week. And from
only 6,000 users of heated tobacco products out of the 280-odd thousand people smoking.
Yeah. So they're sold in vape shops, and I guess it's just an accident. I suppose if someone is buying vape products, then they might come across them and ask, what's this? I mean, there was restrictions put on vape shop, anyone selling vape products. They're not allowed to talk about, they're not allowed to support people to stop smoking and say, well, because it used to be that the person would say, oh, this isn't working for me, or in the vape, specialist vape stores used to give advice because they'd often been through it themselves, and then they changed the law and stopped them from communicating and supporting people and providing that kind of, well, you could try this, and I did this, and they're allowed to talk about the product, and that's it. They're not allowed to give any advice on how to actually go through that cessation process and all of the things that a quit coach, for example, or a counsellor could do, but probably better because it's a peer-to-peer support rather than someone who thinks they're better.
So if we look at the Japan situation, freely available anywhere, heated tobacco products, large uptake, 40% reduction in cigarette sales as a result, why aren't we copying them?
It's, I guess, because the heated tobacco products, so the first thing that happened was that's a Philip Morris, they created the IQOS brand and then trialled it in a number of markets. So it's a tobacco product. It's a tobacco company product. So in New Zealand, tobacco control, how they feel about a tobacco company, and they've now extended that out to be any tobacco company, any vape industry, independent vape industry company, anyone who happens to have a relationship with anybody that works in a tobacco company or a vape industry company. And they just have widened the circle out to include anyone who says anything positive about these products would be considered now tobacco industry by
the attack on me then. After
yes.
Yeah, but I don't care. They can attack me all they like. I think we just need to look at evidence, and Japan is evidence. It's real evidence.
Yeah.
Sweden is even more impressive, isn't it?
Well, actually, before you move on to Sweden, so after what happened in Japan, so they had the IQOS and then British American Tobacco, another major tobacco company in the world. They bought out their own brand of a heated tobacco product. And so Japan Tobacco, owned by the government, what do? And they're like, oh, we've got to get in on this. They created a very clever device. And I've actually been to Japan to study this and met with the Minister of Finance. He knows all about vaping. The issue with Japan was they had a historical law banning nicotine in other products.
Right.
So that they couldn't have vaping. And he said it would take 6 years of enormous amount of lobbying and educating. They have a huge government to get that law changed.
Is popular because it's already in tobacco, it's already in the law, therefore they can roll this out.
That's right. And they couldn't have vaping. They can't have vaping. So vaping, nicotine, you can vape without nicotine, but that's pretty, useless. So vaping with nicotine is banned in Japan due to an historical law. So that's what we see there. Now, Korea copied, and they also experienced a rapid drop in smoking prevalence and a shift from cigarettes. The government there used to own their KG&T, I think it was called, Korean Tobacco Company, but they privatized it some time ago. I think they still get a dividend. I don't, but so they came out with their own brand as well. The drop in cigarette sales was so rapid, the Korean government stepped in and started to say, oh, actually, these are harmful. They had to slow it down because they were losing so much money. It's like they bank on that tax coming in. And if you're just overnight going to lose it, not so much an issue in New Zealand because of the lower numbers of smoking, but in a country like Korea, you lose that in a rapid way. It's just suddenly gone. You're going to have a huge hole in your budget from the loss of tax. So the government stepped in and slowed it down. However, you can't stop people from learning and making these healthy choices for themselves. And so it's just continuing. They also have experienced massive drop. We never hear about Korea and Japan because it's a heated tobacco product. Sweden had snus historically. It's using tobacco. It's pasteurized, so it's boiled, and that removes a lot of the toxins and the carcinogens.
Don't smoke it though, do you?
No, it's then pasteurized down, and it used to just be put in the mouth under the top lip between the gum and your cheek on its own, just bundled up, a bundle of it. And then eventually, it was put into a small cloth bag. And then, so snus alone, way before the introduction of vaping, heated tobacco products, or oral nicotine products, which is not tobacco. So that's a cellulose fiber that's then had nicotine added to it. So no tobacco in there. Snus alone created the Swedish experiences, or experiment experience, as we call it, that reduced smoking to very, very low levels. Then along comes vaping, heated tobacco products, and oral nicotine products, and now they're at 5.8%. They have 30 years of epidemiological evidence showing Sweden has the lowest rates of heart disease, the lowest rates of lung cancer, the lowest rates, all these smoking-related diseases. And that was the proof that providing people with a lower risk product works. But in New Zealand, and I was when I was chair of End Smoking NZ, and we were lobbying for snus to be legalised here, we were constantly told, oh, but Sweden is different. Culturally, it's different from New Zealand. New Zealanders won't take to snus. They're not going to want to put a little tea bag up under their lip. I think that the success we have had with vaping, that we are now at we've 6.8% smoking prevalence. We're right on. Sweden was going to get to 5% way before everybody else. And suddenly, and it feels very sudden, we are there. We're right there on their tail. And this December, when the ministry puts out the stats, we could be at 5%. So could Sweden. They're a little bit ahead of us.
Had to do it with these bizarre things that the Labour Party were trying to push through to us. With low nicotine tobacco, which doesn't exist anywhere in the world.
It does. There's a tobacco company called Century 21, and many companies before have tried to produce a low nicotine cigarette. They've always failed at market. People try them and go, well, it doesn't work. And so they fail at market. So if you put it out on the market, people buy it, they're not going to buy it again. And so Century 21, they have a product. And in fact, some of our tobacco control researchers have met with this tobacco company. I thought that was wrong, and lobbied for them.
Does that talk about big tobacco being evil and they're meeting with tobacco?
They met with Century 21, have done research on the products and have lobbied the government to give Century 21, a US tobacco company who also sell combustible cigarettes and maybe cigars, I think. And these academics, the very ones against vaping products, have lobbied the New Zealand government, the Labour government, to give this Century 21 a monopoly contract for supply. And they went ahead and the government, and they did it. The Labour government passed that law.
What's the science? I mean, there's clear science and evidence about heated tobacco products, as you've talked about, Japan and Korea. There's clear science out of Sweden. You've produced a report recently that shows that the reduction of harm approach has been successful in New Zealand without the need for prohibition or anything like that. We're almost at 5%, which is, that's the goal. Surely we could get over that goal if we introduced, oral nicotine products and made those easily available, like Zyn, which I use.
Oh.
Right. I mean, I can't smoke cigars in my apartment building, but I can keep my nicotine levels high using Zyn. The excuse that Kiwis won't put a little tea bag under their lip is bollocks. The American experience of oral nicotine products shows that people readily change from using cigarettes or cigars or pipes to oral nicotine products. Even famous podcasters have talked about it, on their show. About using these products, and they even talk about walrussing, right? You've heard that, but that's 2 pouches, one on each side.
Yes.
I don't know how anyone can do that, because even the 3 milligram ones that I use give you an instantaneous, nicotine hit within about 3 or 4 minutes, and there's no way you could keep them in there for 15, 20 minutes. You seriously get knocked about.
That's why we have to have a range of products because different people are different, and they like different flavors. They need, they like a different strength, and they like a different experience. And I think that the current government is on the right track. So we were sitting at the end of December 23, 6.8%.
Wow.
And we've done that. Vaping has, the government itself says in its cabinet paper, they've created this rapid drop in smoking prevalence. From 2019, it was at, say, 12%, 11.9, so 12%. And we are down in just, 2019, 5 years, we're down to 6.8%. This is unheard of. This is like a dream come true for me, to see such rapid reduction in smoking prevalence.
Allowed, vape shops or heated tobacco to be advertised. Imagine we'd be below 5% now if they'd been advertised instead of it all being secret squirrel.
I think, and the other thing is that the misinformation about nicotine, the misinformation about vaping products, pushed by University of Otago academics, Asthma and Respiratory Foundation, the Cancer Society, these public health groups, many, some of them directly funded by pharmaceutical companies, the competition, because they have the nicotine replacement products and cessation medications, and their sales have gone through the floor. They are losing, they've lost so much income from their own nicotine products. And, Yeah, so the misinformation, and my research is bearing that out as well, it's putting people off vaping, even though they put off vaping and they hear all of these horror stories and, reefer type madness about
Yeah,
vaping.
isn't it? Schools are all, kids are smoking, are bringing vapes to school. So what? Do you want them to bring cigarettes to school like we used to?
Yeah, Asthma and Respiratory Foundation targeted schools, principals and teachers with a whole program to manipulate their knowledge on the topic. And so they created this real panic among parents and schools and teachers. And so you have these so-called public health groups that are leading these misinformation campaigns. And that is doing a lot of damage. We would have been below 5% now if they had not put out just blatant lies. And then we also have a lot of researchers around the world who have fallen into believing this and who are creating, some of the papers I read, not only are they scientifically flawed, they're just blatantly misled or deliberately written to mislead everybody about the relative risk of these products compared to smoking.
That's what I mentioned before about Dr. Jude Ball from Otago University. She's horrified that we're going to legalize oral nicotine products because they're connected with tobacco industry interests. And if you point out to her, now hang on a second, isn't that better than smoking? And nicotine, whilst it's addictive, is actually beneficial. And I'm proof of that. And her response was to label nicotine as an insecticide, which is actually a lie, because what she's talking about, she quotes this thing from Science Direction: nicotine has moderate to high toxicity for all vertebrates. Nicotine kills insects rapidly, often within an hour. Well, how's that relevant? It's not even talking about it. It's neonicotinoids, which are similar, but it's not what's in vapes or pouches. So she's a public health expert who's using her academic freedom to spread misinformation, and nobody does anything.
Yeah, I don't think that she actually knows the truth. I think that, and I can speak from experience. I've been in that bubble. It's a tightly controlled sector. You are fed information and you are not allowed to read research that is outside of the,
what academic freedom is all about, isn't it?
No, there's no such thing as academic freedom. That's been gone for a long time. And, so even I can look back and look at things that I used to say, and I've learned that they were wrong. What was it? Nicotine. There were lots of things I would say about nicotine, that 50 milligrams would kill an elephant. That's what I was taught. And then I went to a conference. This is, recent and say the last decade. Go to a conference and there's some presenter showing, they went back through all the research. Where did this 50 milligrams is the lethal dose? Where did that come from? They went back all the way through into the late 1800s, where a doctor experimented on himself. How much nicotine would it take to kill a person? And estimated, once he couldn't take any more or whatever, he estimated 50 milligrams. It's not even based on a scientific study. A doctor said it. The other thing that this researcher who was presenting had done is look at suicides and attempted murders or actual murders where nicotine had been used. So this is a really bizarre harm that occurs from putting out a message like nicotine is a poison and the lethal dose is this. So people go, okay, lethal dose is that. I'm going to stick patches all over this person while they're asleep, and then this has actually been done. People have tried to kill people and people have tried to kill themselves. by overdosing on nicotine. And so he looked at all of those incidents where people had died, and how much nicotine had they ingested to achieve that end. It is in the hundreds, not 50 milligrams. So I don't think that Jude knows the truth. I don't like to use the word cult because there are some seriously bad, cults in the world, but there were definitely cult-like features in tobacco control and in the public health conferences that I went to, where you'd have a charismatic speaker, talking about the evil of nicotine and using slides that are completely unrelated from World War II Nazi Germany and barbed wire and just these. I'm sitting there, my background was psychology, and I'm going, hang on a minute, this is like blatant psyops, having a completely unrelated, horrific picture behind what he's saying. And I'm like, wow, this is like brainwashing. I'm looking around and everyone was transfixed. And all I could do, I just sat there and just wrote down what was happening because it was so shocking. And if you say anything, you question the ideology that we're supposed to prescribe to, believe, then you get Marewa, you're cancelled. You will be run out of your job. You will never get funding again. You will be
cancelled on reality check radio. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Anu Wa from the University of Auckland, I got this information under Official Information Act. He contacted human research ethics committees to lobby them to never give me ethics approval for any of my research. This is the lengths they go to. It's unprofessional and it's unethical and it's censorship.
Well, we're totally against that. We're coming up against time, Marewa, but you're an expert. What would you recommend for a long-term smoker who wants to quit? What would work for them?
Well, actually, in my current study, many of them don't want to quit, and that is something that isn't recognised as well. So the tobacco control sector puts out that 75% of people want to quit. A majority regret that they ever started. But what is overlooked is that there are a percentage who don't want to quit. They're quite happy. One of our elderly women in our Voices of the 5% study, and we have a website called Voices of the 5%, I'm putting all their case stories up there, open for anyone to read. And I really hope people do, because you need to understand what people's lives are, why they smoke, and they might try and quit. But then, like one of our guys, his partner tried to hang herself, and he sent the kids down to her house. So they found, real traumas are happening to people. So the elderly woman, she said to us, she's in a rest home, she's got her own villa. If she didn't have smoking, this is when they were bringing in the denicotinized cigarettes. So she was like, if I don't have this, I don't see any point in living and going on. It was the most rewarding thing she had in her life left. And there are a lot of old people who are just discarded to the margins.
I can understand that. After I had my stroke, I basically didn't do anything for 2 years except sit on my deck chair and watch the tide go in and out, because I really didn't have any energy to do anything else. And so I sat there and smoked cigars. And when you smoke a cigar, it takes an hour or more, depending on the size of the cigar or whatever, but it's definitely more than an hour. And I found that to be really relaxing and really pleasant to just sit there and contemplate the world whilst, intermittently moving the cigar up to my mouth and tasting the cigar, and it was a time for me to detoxify myself from society. I made sure my phone was off. I made sure there was nothing but sounds of nature around me as I sat there and contemplated everything.
Yeah.
It slowed me down. And I can understand what that lady's talking about. You know, she uses smoking as a contemplative, almost a meditative.
A friend. It's a friend. And it's, you know, one of our only things, you know, many of us have no idea of the loneliness that many elderly people live with. And the loss of purpose. We have one guy who suffered a brain injury from an accident, and the loss of purpose. And he said, I'll go and do this, and I'll go to the shop and I'll do, you know, tend to my tomatoes, and then I'll take some sleeping pills because I've got nothing to do. And so, you know, what's really important for people is having a purpose and all of those wonderful things we need as humans, friends, involvement, a role in society. And we discard these peoples to the margins through poverty. They can't afford to do anything, and through discrimination and just, you know, age discrimination. We take away their purpose. They have no role anymore and no friends. So I really want people to understand why people smoke. If someone is a long-term smoker and they want to quit, then what a lot of our participants did, and we researched and surveyed people who didn't want to quit or didn't believe they would be able to quit by 2025. We've been following them for nearly 4 years. And even among people who in 2020 did not see themselves ever stopping smoking, and there's 30% don't want to. They don't want to, and they're not interested in vaping. But many others did try vaping, and then there's lots of barriers why it doesn't work for some people, and it's an off-ramp. You go you're on the motorway. Some people are in the fast lane. They're nowhere near the exit lane. And the ones on the exit lane, and they take the off-ramp, they both smoke and vape, and they could do that for a year, 2 years. And then for some people, it's a slow change. For others, it's fast. Everyone's different. And then they manage to cut down. So Bob, one of our participants, he is down to one skinny racehorse. So he breaks cigarettes down and can roll 4 or 5 out of one cigarette.
Wow, that's some skill.
Yeah. And he's down to one a day. And that, for me, is a fantastic, you know, achievement for him. He's vaping a lot, but he just one a day from, I think he entered the study 4 years ago. He was already vaping, but he was smoking about 4, 5, maybe 6 skinny racehorses a day. So you talking about one cigarette ripped down into, say, 4 racehorses, and he already had reduced his harm a lot by doing even that, but he's still, you know, trying to get rid of that last one, but he can't, and I'm proud of him.
It's probably, you know, entertaining in breaking down a cigarette and seeing how many racehorses you can make out of it, you know. I couldn't even try to do that. It'd be too hard, you know.
And think of the time involved. And this is another thing I've learned from all of these wonderful people across New Zealand who has stuck with us for 4 years while we're just asking, how's it going, you know, every now and then. And one of the things I've learned is the indignity that these policies impose upon people. You know, everyone has got something better to do than sitting there ripping apart a cigarette and making racehorses, right? That's time. Or there was one horrible case you might have seen some time back where this man thought, oh, cigarette butts are disappearing from my ashtray on my deck. So he put a camera and he caught this Māori woman coming at like 2 o'clock in the morning to steal cigarette butts.
That little bit of tobacco that's left over.
Yeah, you can buy bags of cigarette butts, on Facebook for $10, a big bag of cigarette butts. And then people will rip them apart. And, this is an indignity. And I think really the indignity, the people who are acting undignified are public health by creating these circumstances that force people to find cigarettes that way. And even recently, my partner Steve and I were down at the supermarket and a Māori woman came up. Māori have higher smoking rates, overrepresented among lower socioeconomic. She comes up to him and he was vaping actually, and she said, have you got a cigarette? And he's like, no, I don't smoke cigarettes. And she's like, please, I'll do 10 push-ups for you. Yeah. It's like, we've really lost, public health have lost an understanding. They don't understand people's lives, the circumstances that lead them to use products that relieve the stress and the trauma, the pain, and they don't care. They don't care anymore, and it's a real loss. I think public health, you just got to scale it back to its basics. Make sure that water is clean. Make sure that restaurants are not serving contaminated food. Get back to the basics, and get back to understanding.
Trying to control lives.
Yeah, we're there to help people. If they want help, you can. Yep, okay. Lead paint was bad. Okay, come on.
It can't be that bad. There's a whole generation's chewed on
pencils.
Yeah, pencils with lead paint in them, and cots and toys that were covered in lead paint. Didn't hurt us, really, did it?
Yeah, but let the market innovate. Let the market come up with solutions. Let
the market advertise those solutions so that we can reduce. I mean, smoking is awful. It's a horrible habit, really. But no one in New Zealand now can say, well, we weren't told, right? We all know. We all know what the health effects are of smoking. But if people choose to do that, I mean, I'm a bit of a libertarian. If people choose to do that and harm themselves, it's up to them. They pay tax for the privilege of it. So, that's really where it should be left now. If we get under 5% and we're almost there, you're right, we should move on to let's tackle obesity now, or let's tackle the next thing that's causing problems. Yeah,
that's right. I don't like the compartmentalization of public health. So you have like this group only do smoking, and they do the lungs, they do the cervix, they do the kidney. As a public health professor and when I was a policy analyst, we had to look at all of the diseases, which is the one killing the most people, which is the one that's causing, the most harm for the most people. And we had to prioritize. And in that first year with Helen Clark, brought in the Smoke-Free Environments Act, set up the Public Health Commission 1993. And this is what we had to do as the Public Health Commission. And we had to prioritize 10 and write policy advice for her on that. And that kind of knowledge and expertise as, how to analyze policy, how governments need to work. There's not an endless bucket of money. You must prioritize. You also have to talk with stakeholders. You also have to bring the public along. And that's all been whittled down and lost. Now it's like, well, no, we told you smoking kills. You didn't stop, so we're just going to make you stop. And that isn't, that's, as I said, it's a breach of human rights, and it's not what New Zealand used to be.
Well, we need to go back to that. And on that note, Marewa Glover, thank you very much for coming on the show. And I'm definitely going to be back when you get some more research that comes out, because it's a fascinating chat. That's for sure.
Thank you, Cam. And it's been really great to talk with you about this topic. And thank you so much for inviting me on your show. I don't get very many invites because I'm cancelled. But I have so much work to do anyway.
Yeah, but you're not cancelled here.
Thank you.
All views, and I just hope that some of these public health people that are out there will climb off their high horse and talk to me, where I can ask them, well, what about the evidence of Japan? What about the evidence of Korea? What about the evidence of Sweden? And put those questions to them so that they can tell us what their working is.
Yeah, USA, Norway, Iceland, Russia. There are so many countries now that are going this way, and the evidence it's almost overwhelming. So the fact that Australia can do what they're doing in the face of international experience, the lack of evidence for what they're doing, it's amazing. It's a weird phenomenon. We're in weird times.
We are indeed, and thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
There were some amazing revelations in that interview. First, that some public health advocates are working cap in hand with a big American tobacco company and trying to get policy, and succeeded, influenced through the Labour Party, and that those same public health officials are actually propagandists and political operatives with a tame MP in the guise of Aisha Verrill. Watch them come for us now for daring to have a yarn with Dr. Glover. Tell me what you think. Email inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
This is The Crunch with Cam Slater. Conversations with a side of controversy, right here on RCR.
She's back. Olivia Pierson is back on The Crunch for her latest edition of Olivia's Views. She's with me now. Welcome back to The Crunch, Olivia. Great to have you and share your view, which is what you're going to do right now.
Well, thanks, Cam. Good to be here. My view this week is titled, Politics is All Caligula's Horse Now.
Oh, sounds very riveting and interesting.
Well, when Joe Biden ran for the office of president back in 2020 with obvious dementia in play, we in New Zealand were currently under the joyless years of the equine Jacinda Ardern's regime. Everything had been turned on its head, right down to our Bill of Rights, to say nothing of healthy people enduring home detentions our governments called lockdowns to keep us safe, or safe in Cindy speak. I remember saying to my husband that all politics now was running at Caligula's horse levels of absurdity. If anyone needs reminding of the ancient Roman story, where Emperor Caligula, who was one very depraved sicko, in order to mock and perhaps even scare the Roman Senate, he threatened to make his favourite horse, Incitatus, a consul, believing he would be an improvement on senatorial wisdom. I don't believe that this ever transpired, not because Caligula wasn't twisted enough to actually do it, he was, but because he himself was swiftly murdered by his own praetorians. Rome had had enough of his imperial autocratic insanity, and there were even those who wanted to return the empire back to being a republic again. Alas, things only got worse from there. Within several generations of Caesars, who were arguably much worse than Caligula, his nephew was the sadistic and cruel Nero. The Senate was eventually stripped of all power, becoming nothing more than a ceremonial role. Rome never again became a republic. The republic once lost was lost forever. In Joe Biden's strange address to the American people last week, informing them he was staying on as president, he quoted in his bumbling fashion the anecdote about Benjamin Franklin exiting the 4-month meeting of the Constitutional Congress in 1787. A woman asked him, "Well, doctor, what have we got, a republic or a monarchy?" Franklin famously replied, "A republic, if you can keep it." Now, the audacity of Biden quoting that story at this particular moment in history is just so off the charts, given how much he has actually done to help bring the American Republic to an end. Starting with the stolen election of 2020 and the persecution of all those who seriously levelled that charge, to the 15 to 20 million illegal aliens allowed in over the southern border, who will all be voting in this year's election, even though they are not legal citizens. Then there's the total persecution of his political rival, Donald Trump. Biden has allowed his Department of Justice to commit unprecedented levels of lawfare to bankrupt Trump or lock him away for 1,000 years. And only 2 weeks ago, there was a horrifying attempt to assassinate Trump in broad daylight, which was obviously a political hit involving the Secret Service and FBI of Biden's administration. Of course, the term Biden's administration is always said by me tongue-in-cheek, since his dementia has precluded any thoughtful governing, which means he has been somebody's puppet all along, as Kamala Cackle's hyena Harris would also be should she succeed. They are both as incapable of governing America as Incitatus the horse would have been of acting like a competent consul in Rome's ancient Senate. The only thing I would say on that note is that Incitatus would have been much, much better, because he at least would have done absolutely nothing. Whereas Biden and Harris have actually done things, very destructive things. Veteran investigative journalist Seymour Hersh, the same Hersh who broke the story during the Vietnam War about the atrocity of the My Lai massacre and the government cover-up of it, Hersh came out with an article last week titled "Leaving Las Vegas: Inside the Last Tortured Days of the Biden Campaign." Relying on only one insider source, a White House senior official who didn't want to be named for obvious reasons, Hersh claims that Barack Obama, with the blessing of Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Raheem Jeffries, phoned Biden and threatened him with the 25th Amendment if he didn't withdraw from the presidential campaign. Obama told Biden, allegedly, that he also had permission from Kamala Harris as the VP, since she is the official who would have to invoke the 25th Amendment and then assume all presidential duties. If this report is true, and I have to say it does have the ring of truth, that is called a coup. And if Biden is not fit enough that they have to take him out of running as the incumbent in this year's election, he can hardly be fit enough to continue being the president with all the duties that role includes, such as commander-in-chief of the entire American armed forces. Obama is not even officially in government anymore, and neither is Nancy Pelosi. These meddlers ceaselessly buzz around like vultures circling a dying animal. And that's exactly what Biden is, a dying puppet president. According to Hersh, Obama told Biden in that phone call that he was withholding his endorsement of Kamala for a spell, presumably as a tactic to look innocent by way of any meddling on his part. As soon as Biden made that forced and overdue TV appearance to say he was withdrawing from the presidential race this year, but staying on as the president, the Obamas staged this phony phone call to Cackles, which of course was filmed and recorded before being swiftly transmitted to X and beyond. And we're going to have some fun with this too, aren't we? Thank goodness the clip ends before she burst into her grating laugh. For Kamala, running for president of the United States is emotionally similar to a fun day at kindergarten playing doctors and nurses, which I bet she excelled at in ways we wouldn't want to imagine. Caligula's horse-level absurdity, all games, tricks, and fun. She has now been endorsed by all the people who matter in this sick pantomime: the Clintons, who hate the Obamas who hate the Bidens, and the Bidens who now hate everybody. The Democrat Party is the party of hate, corruption, puppets, and phonies. They do not have an authentic bone left in their body politic. But there is an antidote to all this absurdity, lying in the powerful opposition, you know, the same opposition that's so powerful that only 2 weeks ago they tried to murder it in Pennsylvania. It's Trump with his MAGA Republicans behind him. This time 4 years ago in 2020, the Republicans, especially the never-Trumpers, were trying to resist the sheer force of the MAGA pressure, which resulted in a stolen election where many Republicans were just as complicit as Democrats. They were too weak and still pleading for civility in all discourse and debates, etc. But this year's RNC showed us that the Republican Party is fully MAGA now. I've noticed that instead of pleading for civility, Republicans like Marjorie Taylor Greene are now telling woke BBC reporters to F off instead of trying to be polite in the face of their obvious activist journalism tactics designed to just play gotcha. And in the House Oversight Committee hearing to get to the bottom of obvious Secret Service failures, gentlewomen Republicans who have always observed the polite formalities of civic-mindedness are now repairing to expressions such as, "You really are full of shit," as Nancy Mace said to the director of the Secret Service, Kimberly Cheetle, last week before forcing her resignation. These expressions of contempt are important if you morally value your Republican forms. There comes a time when the evil is just so in your face and constantly pandered to that you just have to draw a line which says no further and forget civility as an automatic response to sheer evil. I'm really glad Republicans are finally here. They should have been 100% aboard in 2016 and 2020 instead of having arguments and silly scruples about Trump's tone and mean tweets. The party of Caligula's horse absurdity is now having a crack at J.D. Vance over his childless cat lady comments, which he said to Tucker Carlson in an interview on Fox 3 years ago. The Mockingbird media has gone nuts over this old comment in an attempt to paint J.D. Vance as weird. Vance is absolutely correct when he points out how anti-family the Democrat Party have become over the years. One of their major platform issues to win votes is easy abortion policy. I have seen Democrat women protesting hysterically against the Dobbs decision of 2022 that the Supreme Court ruled on to return abortion legislation back to the individual states. Some of these women were quite clearly nuts. One of them even had her swollen pregnant belly exposed with writing on it stating, "This will be my 6th abortion." Imagine being proud of that and declaring it publicly. Caligula-level insanity right there. Recently, Trump urged Christians in his address at Turning Point Action's Believers Summit to turn out for him ahead of Election Day, calling it the most important election ever. He added that if elected, Christian-related concerns will be fixed, so much so that they would no longer need to be politically engaged. Democrats then used the Mockingbird media to say that this was Trump declaring himself as the dictator he's going to be if elected again. He's going to fix the system so people can't vote anymore, they mendaciously asserted. What nonsense. He also promised to create a federal task force without anti-Christian bias, as well as to defund schools pushing critical race theory, transgender insanity, and other inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content onto the lives of children. Amen to that. The innocence of children needs to be protected in schools again. Personally, I still have my doubts that the presidential candidate for Democrats will actually be Kamala Harris. But we won't actually know until they hold their convention in Chicago come mid-August. That's when we'll see the full ticket emerge. But one thing is for certain. We are in very strange times where so many absurdities have now become normal, and no Democrat candidate, especially a Caligula's horse, will be able to win against Trump and his MAGA movement without a massive attempt at cheating and another election steal. Democrats have shown us that they will do absolutely anything, no matter how low and vile, to hold on to their power. And look at what just took place in Venezuela. And that is Olivia's view for the Crunch this week.
Fabulous, Olivia. Absolutely riveting. But I've got a question for you. Despite all of that, we've got a lot of our listeners who are saying, hey, how come Cam and Olivia aren't talking about Robert Kennedy Jr.?
Oh, well, what should we be saying about him?
Well, that's the thing. There's all sorts of feedback that's saying, this is the real deal. He's the man to save America. He's this, he's that, he's everything else apart from the savior. And I'm sitting there shaking my head and I'm thinking, how can I explain this in easy to understand terms without actually getting into a civics lecture about how the American political system works?
Well, he's an independent.
That's right. And history shows us in the 200 and something years of the Republic that only one independent has ever been elected. And ironically, it was the first president, George Washington, who was unanimously elected by the whole of Congress to be the president.
Yeah, due to services to the revolution.
That's right. So there have been notable exceptions, people who were independent candidates but didn't win, who then subsequently joined a party like the Democrats or the Republicans and then went on to win the presidency. But after George Washington, and what are we up to? We're up to president number 47 at the next election. There's been 45 subsequent presidents. Not one has been elected as an independent.
No.
So history against him.
And if it couldn't happen for Teddy Roosevelt with the Bull Moose Party, it won't happen for Kennedy.
No.
Nowhere near it. No, I mean, independent, the Americans don't like independents and they're never going to win. They have to join one of the major parties. I think some of our people, Cam, would like to have seen Trump name Kennedy as his VP. They wanted to see that, didn't they?
Forget, though, that Kennedy's not independent. He's actually a Democrat.
Yeah, he's always been a Democrat.
Right? Yeah. The Kennedy clan are Democrats. They're through and through. Kennedy's standing independently because he can't stomach the Democratic Party right now, but is by no means a Republican. And if you go back through his long history, there's a few things there that raise a few questions for political tragics like myself.
Well, he was a massive greenie for a long time, very much behind the climate change stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's that. But a lot of people have only really seen Robert F. Kennedy Jr. In the last 3 or 4 years when he's been, yes, he's got street cred when it comes to the COVID nonsense and all of this.
Yeah, he does.
But that's like 3 years out of a 30-year history. So,
yeah, no, I wouldn't be a great fan. I really respect the work he's done on all the anti-vax stuff. I think he's done the Lord's work there for sure, so to speak. But he is a Democrat. He would be enormously liberal over issues that you want conservative ideas on. And I think Trump chose the right man. And J.D. Vance, I like him.
I just laughed like hell when the Democrats got upset about the crazy cat lady comment. You know, the thing with J.D. Vance is he's a lot like Trump. Is he thinks he knows what he thinks, and then he says what he thinks. And you're not going to die wondering what he's actually thinking about something. But he's actually done the hard yards, as a kid, and starting out in his career, served as a Marine. He's got some huge credentials there.
Oh, he does. And remember, he was one of the never Trumpers until he saw Trump govern, and he changed his mind. He thought he was an excellent president. I really like J.D. Vance. I think that what I love, you just mentioned it, between he and Trump, they're both so authentic. And it's that authenticity that you just do not ever see on the Democrat side. They are all tactics and pretense and fakes and phonies. And, you're never going to get good conviction politicians amongst people like that. They're all in the Republican side now. And the Republican side has never been perfect. I mean, they have some really revolting people in there. Mitt Romney springs to mind, Liz Cheney, of course, and others, Raffensperger in Georgia, and people like that who have been very corrupted, especially by money. But they have now had to take a second seat to the MAGA Republicans. MAGA has completely won that party.
Yeah, the comment that the Democrats, using out of context, they're accusing Trump of trying to be a dictator or be a king. I mean, any sensible person watching that, he's saying to Christian voters who don't typically vote, because, and this is what people don't understand about the United States, is a deeply religious society. Church is right through every levels of society. And so there's a large swathe of Christians who believe in the render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and don't get involved in politics, don't vote because that's part of Caesar's thing, so they don't. What Trump was imploring them to do was, please, just this one time, I need you to vote. And then once I'm finished my 4 years, I'm done. I can only serve 2 terms. You can go back to doing whatever you want. That's what he's saying.
That was what he was saying. It was, that's where he, speaks off the cuff, but there's nothing wrong with what he said at all. And remember that the Amish never vote on principle. The Amish and the Mennonites do not vote. And small cultures like that, they just, the reason they love America is they just love being left alone. But in 2016, the Amish came out and voted for the first time for Trump because they knew that they were going to be under religious persecution, and they have been. There's that famous Amish guy that runs that farm with beautiful food, really pure food, made millions of dollars from it. And he's been hit with lawfare to try and shut down his farm. I wish I could remember his name off the top of my head. But people like that are going to vote again, and they will look forward to the day where they don't have to vote again, exactly as Trump was saying.
Yeah, well, the Democrats are just looking like mendacious, nasty, vindictive people, and ultimately that fails at the election because people don't like the nasty.
No, nastiness and corruption has a very bad odor, and it's very obvious. I just don't think the people are going to be duped. But they weren't duped in 2020 either, remember. They will do anything to steal this election. I just don't know what it will be.
The only thing that smells more than the stench of corruption that you mentioned is desperation, and desperation is a very cologne, and that's what I'm seeing from the Democrats.
Yeah, it's all of those things, isn't it? And most assuredly, it's desperation.
On that note, Olivia, thank you so much for sharing your views on the crunch.
You're very welcome. Talk again soon, Cam.
Okay. Tell me what you think about Olivia's view. Email inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
You've heard the words open, fair, both sides of the story. It's easy to say them, but practicing them often seems like a bridge too far. New Zealand, it's time for a reality check. RCR, Reality Check Radio. Rational discussion, common sense, and open debate for real. With me, Paul Brennan.
You just can't make this stuff up. You couldn't write the script.
Veteran broadcaster Peter Williams.
Where is the evidence they actually make a difference? It turns out that was a very fair question to ask.
Taking on the mainstream, Chantel Baker.
Mainstream media, as usual, in their little perch.
The man who cares so much and whose background is for real, Rodney Hyde.
The doctors don't believe them. They can't get ACC. They can't work. They're told it's all in their head.
Along with a raft of contributors to inform, entertain, and bring the truth back to New Zealand media. It's time for a reality check, all right. RCR, Reality Check Radio, at www.realitycheck.radio. We've arrived.
Now it's time for Cam's Buddies. This week we'll find out what they think about the carry-on in the Olympics opening ceremony. Was it an affront to Christians, just a bit of woke art, or something else? My producer has them all lined up and ready to go. Let's go now to Cam's Buddies. Welcome to Cam's Buddies, Miles. Good to have you back.
Hello, Cam. How are you today?
Fantastic. And we're back in the afternoon.
Excellent.
Normal service resumes.
Sounds fantastic, except I just wish the French could have had some bouquets, but I think they just got brickbats.
Well, that was exactly what I was going to talk to you about. What did you think about the official opening? Do you think it was sacrilegious or demonic or all the other epithets, or is it just a bit of cheerful nonsense that we all should just ignore?
Oh, look, firstly, I thought it was strictly amateurish. When I looked at it, I thought, good Lord, this is all they could come up with? And it seemed like amateur hour, at the local theatre. And I thought, my first thought was it's strictly amateur, and it didn't look like it had any thought applied. And when I was looking at the subject matter, I began to get more and more grumpy and to the point of being angry and wondering what exactly all this palaver and all these skits had to do with France. I just was gobsmacked. And yes, frankly speaking, it was blasphemous, over the top and outrageous. And it looked like some school kid had done it on an amateur budget, to be honest.
Well, there's some talk that it wasn't the Last Supper that they were mocking, that it was Bellini's painting of the Feast of the Gods and Dionysus, celebrating Dionysus. But if you have a look at Bellini's The Feast of the Gods painting, it bears no resemblance at all to what they were portraying, with a haloed figure in the middle. But it looked incredibly like Da Vinci's Last Supper painting, which I've always wondered about. Didn't they use both sides of the table back in those days? But anyway, that's another aside.
Let's be honest, Cam. You and I both know that explaining is losing.
Yeah.
And the fact is that they made an absolute botch up. If it was innocent, which I don't think it was.
I think it's deliberate.
If it was innocent, my goodness, what a stuff up. But I think it was a planned takeoff, and I think it was in very, very poor taste. I mean, look, we're talking about France. This has got some skiing in the Alps, wine, cheese. I mean, they could have done something representative of France, real France, but instead they chose less than 1% of the population, and they highlighted that, and frankly speaking, it was distasteful, if you could put a word on it, and blasphemous at the worst.
I mean, they could have had, some French army soldiers marching backwards like they always do, or something similar to that. Or maybe harkening back to the reason why the Champs-Élysées has trees down it so German soldiers can march in the shade.
Look, you're right. And I mean, obviously, you're taking the mickey, and it's fair enough. The French deserve it for that atrocious opening ceremony. And it was just amateur hour. And I thought to myself, how does that opening ceremony represent France? And the answer I have to say is I believe it didn't. And if in fact anyone thought it represented France, they're sadly mistaken.
Unless they're representing that France is a hedonistic society that's populated by weirdos.
Let's not go down that route. I think that France has more than enough offerings to the world culture for a opening ceremony to be, I don't know, I guess entertaining and informative, and showing people about the French way of life and the French mindset. And I can't see why they didn't do that. Oh, yes, I can. I can see why they didn't do it. It was because some idiot got in his mind that he should be able to represent less than 1% of the population, and in doing so, he managed to absolutely enrage almost all the population.
They would never have mocked, a scene from the Quran, would they? They'd never have mocked Islam in the opening ceremony of the Olympics in Paris. But they seem
not at all
to mock Christians because they know there's not going to be, mass burnings in the street or bombs going off or acts of terrorism for being mocked. Christians go, oh, well, you want to do that? It's up to you. But radical Islam to any sort of criticism.
Well, I think that the Christians and Western nations in general are having a bit of a say, and I think it's telling that the YouTube videos and so forth of the opening ceremony have been cancelled. And I think, what on earth were they thinking is just a minor question. And who on earth was in charge is it? And frankly speaking, the head of the French Olympic Committee who signed off on this, they need to go. And
all you have to do is put a bit of pressure on the French, and they put their hands up. They're not known as the cheese-eating surrender monkeys for nothing.
And speaking of cheese, couldn't they have done something with cheese? I mean, France has given us so many great cheeses.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if they're going to mock Christians, they could have done Jesus Christ.
Good Lord, I don't think we want to go down that particular road. But, cheese, wine, skiing, there's so many other things that French have given us. And why haven't they and why didn't they? These are questions that have bugged me, and I can only think they did this by design, and I can think that someone somewhere thought it would be a smart idea. And the reality is, I think it has really put a sour taste on the whole Olympics.
I mean, they could have celebrated the French Foreign Legion. Those guys actually do win things, but that's because they're foreigners, not French.
Look, yeah, I think the French have got a hell of a lot to offer the world, and I think that it was embarrassing to most French people, and I think, as the French bishops said, it was blasphemous. And the reality is that there's a lot of French people who are, in the majority, who find this sort of stuff very distasteful, and I think that the Olympic Committee has really fallen flat on their face. The French Olympic Committee, that is. Yeah,
I think you're right, and even though some of our listeners think it's terrible that we all agree on the Cam's Buddy segment, I think on this occasion we're absolutely right on this. This was an insult. And but, of course, they'll get away with it because the French will just shrug, Christians will just shrug, and the world will go on with its utterly crazy adherence to this nutty religion of, weirdness. Thanks for your call, Miles. I'll talk again next week.
Okay, look after yourself. We'll catch you back.
Okay, see you.
Bye.
Welcome to Cam's Buddies, Lindley. Good to have you back.
Hi, Cam. How's things?
Oh, fantastic. As usual, we're back in our normal time slot. So, it's the, I think I really found getting up early to do things is not my bag. I'm definitely an afternoon person.
Right. Well, we won't do that again then, will we?
Hopefully not. But, we all got to muck it sometimes when needs must. Now, the topic this week is the Olympics opening ceremony and their mockery of the Last Supper. I don't know if you saw it. I didn't, but I've seen the outrage all across X and Facebook. So I'm interested in your thoughts if you managed to see it and what you thought about it.
Did I manage to see it? Not live, no, because after learning of the sabotage of the trains, the uproar over the leading dressage competitor who's disqualified. And the two XY chromosome boxes in the XX, that's women's competition. I never watched the opening because of all that. I just thought the Olympics have become such a joke. I'm suddenly not interested in them. So I didn't watch the opening, but I did catch up with a few sort of still images of it, because most of them they've taken down now, and I wondered what all the uproar was about. But what I saw, Cam, was a pathetic piece in the opening ceremony of the once honourable Olympic Games. What has happened?
Well, what has happened indeed. It just seems, a celebration of degeneracy, weirdness, woke nonsense. That's what it looked like to me.
Well, I thought it was a classic attempt to publicise and normalise DEI and gender bending. Everyone's now talking about it, which is exactly what this aberrated community wants. They want publicity and they want to normalise it. And in that way, they are succeeding because we can't get away from it, can we?
Well, we can't get away with it. Well, there's a bit of pushback in the UK. They've, stopped now supplying these drugs, and the court has upheld the decision. So, we're starting to see some pushback, but it's insane. As Miles said earlier, there's many other things to celebrate about French culture. Why didn't they, celebrate, food and wine and baguettes and cheese and champagne and all that? It's all been overshadowed by this mockery of the Last Supper.
It has, and of course it's the home of some incredibly famous artists. So you can hardly mention this ceremony as art in that context, really. And what I saw in the aftermath in the media was a group of truly hideous human bodies in grotesque poses depicting a form of art in France. I mean, there's just so many famous artists that have come from there. That's why I thought it was just a joke. I can't see why anyone would be offended because it was such a pathetic depiction. It wasn't good enough to make me offended.
Right. Yeah. But do you think they were a bit too chicken to offend Islam?
Absolutely. They'd have been shot. That would have been the end of them, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
But it's all about this DEI move, and I don't know if you saw the comment from the artistic director himself on this insult upon our eyes. He defended his artwork, saying we wanted to include everyone. We have lots of rights in France, and this is what I wanted to convey. So it is about gender bending and DEI. It's not about all those other things about Greek gods and everything that people are bringing up. But the Last Supper painting by Leonardo da Vinci, of course, it's a truly fabulous and clever mural that takes up about 5 by 8 metres of an entire end wall in the refectory of a convent. And I don't know whether you've looked at it even online, but in true 3D, it's a marvellous painting. It appears to take you into another room beyond the painting itself, thus melting into the architecture, really. And it took 3 years in the 1400s to paint. And what I would say is Da Vinci would not be in ecstasy over this. He'd be in agony. Yeah. And God rest his brilliant soul compared to this chap. And the artistic director of this parody on perfection should copy another famous artist, don't you think? Vincent van Gogh. Chop his ear off and go into a mental asylum and never be seen again, and then I'd be happy.
I could always rely on you for a soundbite, Lindley. I'm sure that's going to end up on the socials.
Oh, gosh. Well, I'm sure you'd agree.
Oh, yeah, look, there's so many things that they could have celebrated about France. There's just, I mean, they could have celebrated Vercingetorix standing up to Julius Caesar at Alesia, for example, a famous battle that was a close-run thing. But instead they've got, the pale horse riding with death on it. You've got this nonsense of the Last Supper, and that's what everybody's talking about. No one's talking about how great France is. I mean, they're a laughing stock.
No, well, my worry is it's no longer great because, when you speak of Paris, well, in the past, when people have spoken of Paris, it sort of lifts your imagination to another level. We think of it as all forms of art, history, beautiful things.
Well, there's great architecture. There's, Montmartre. There's, the Cathedral of Notre Dame. Just amazing buildings. You've got all of the artwork that's in the Louvre. You've got just fantastic cultural heritage. I mean, why depict the Last Supper in such a craven, demonic, sacrilegious way?
Well, I've no idea except what the director said. So, I mean, he said that he raved on about the different human rights that they had in France. They had human rights to have whatever sexual denomination they want, and all that sort of thing. He reeled off actually quite a few things that he thought were good about human rights, and I just thought were aberrations of human rights. But anyway, he was happy with that, and he said that's what he wanted to depict. He has never said, to my knowledge, that he wanted to actually create a parody on the Last Supper, but it looks like it is to me.
It looks like it to me. It totally looks like it.
Yes.
People have talked about that. Maybe he's copying Bellini's painting, the Feast of the Gods, or perhaps Jean van Belleur's painting, again, the Feast of the Olympian Gods, which is a mockery in itself of the Last Supper with a Christ figure in the middle. But it doesn't look anything like either of those things. It looks like
and
Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper.
Yes, and people who've seen it say the same thing. I just think it's an absolutely horrific copy or take on the Last Supper. But to be fair, there have been a lot of artists who have done takes on the Last Supper over the years.
Yeah.
It's not the first time that it's been bastardised. It's not the first time.
No, and it won't be the last time. All right, that's all we've got time for today, Lindley. So thank you for calling Cam's Buddies, and we'll talk again next week.
Jolly good. See you later. Bye-bye.
Welcome to Cam's Buddies, Marcus. Long time no hear.
Hey, buddy. How you doing?
Good. You've been off sailing an awful lot, haven't you?
Yeah, mate. Oh, well, you make hay while the sun shines, so to speak, and we've been doing just that with our sailboat. So we've been gallivanting around New Zealand quite a bit. It's been great. Absolutely fantastic country we live in. Beautiful spot.
Yeah, and the weather isn't that bad, for middle of winter either. It was pretty warm.
No, we just took off for a week over to Great Barrier just a couple of weeks ago as well for a midwinter getaway. I must admit I didn't go swimming, but it was pretty cool.
Right. Well, you haven't been on Cam's Buddies for a while, mate, so I've got a curly one for you. Did you watch the opening ceremony of the Olympics? And if you did or didn't, but have subsequently seen later, what are your thoughts on this depiction of the Last Supper?
Yeah, I didn't watch it, but I have seen all the rigmarole about it, and since then looked into it a little bit, and everyone's going on that it's not the Last Supper, it was Dionysus or something, the Greek god of debauchery or whatever. Regardless of all that fact, there's zero interpretation needed from the Da Vinci Last Supper painting to what they actually showed on stage. So there's certainly, at the very least, there was a hat tip to the Last Supper. And to me, it makes more of a mockery because they're utilising that with the Greek god of debauchery, and then having a whole lot of queers and gays and drag queens portraying all the apostles and Jesus himself. So, I mean, it's just laughable. I mean, these people, whether they know what they're doing or not, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't offended. I don't get offended very easy, but I certainly say that they were disrespecting a lot of people and certainly disrespecting the Christian faith. And usually, disrespect is a choice. And you know the old adage, respect is earned. And myself, if I disrespect someone else, that's on purpose. It's not by accident. Whereas offence is a choice by the person receiving it. and these guys certainly went out of their way to disrespect the Christian faith. There's no doubt in my mind about it, and it's just ridiculous. But I mean, like I said, I didn't watch it, and I'm not watching the Olympics anyway, so it doesn't really affect me much. But it's just another stupid thing that's going on in 2024 that we have to endure.
Well, what if they had depicted, Muhammad and a selection of goats? What would have happened then?
I don't know. Probably what happened at Bastos Day or something like that, with the truck driving down, running over all those people.
Yeah.
Probably something like that.
Just
this time they would be chasing all the brightly coloured ones that couldn't run because they're in high heels, whether they're men or women.
Yeah. There's so many things the French could have celebrated, but they chose to celebrate debauchery. I mean, I don't get it.
At the end of the day, what do you expect from a Muslim country?
Well, yeah, pretty much. I mean, it clearly showed that France has fallen.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, the French, they've got rid of the other two colours in their flag just like normal. Just put up the white one. Yep. Yeah. We'll bring you on. Where I saw the interview with the guy that organised the whole thing, the art director or whatever. Where do you call it, art, whatever? And he's bragging about how in France they're allowed to do and love whoever they want. They've got so many rights in France, and they wanted to celebrate inclusivity. Unless, of course, you're Christian, then you can bugger off. But they wanted to show a united front, or it's just all keyword. It felt like I was reading the front page of the WEF webpage. Inclusivity, all these catchphrases that they throw out there thinking they mean something.
What they don't understand, though, with this mass Islamic immigration that they've, particularly in France, is that eventually French will cease to exist and some form of Sharia law will come in, and that'll be the end of all of them.
Mm-hmm. I don't know what to say to that because I don't disagree. I mean, they've been piling in from down Greece way for almost a decade now,
Oh, yeah.
So they just open the borders, and that's what they're trying to do over in the United States now as well. So it's making my yacht look really, really attractive, mate. Off-grid living, that's where it's at.
Yeah, you need a cannon on it, though.
Yeah, well, we'll once we get to certain countries around the world where you can purchase such a thing, we may be making an installation on the bow.
I'm making 2 cannons. I could sell you one.
Oh, yeah? Yeah? Cool. You'll need somewhere to go as well, mate, so you might be begging me for a room.
It won't be a room, it'll be a bunk, won't it? And a cabin. They call them
exactly.
On yachts.
And you'll be the cabin boy.
Cabin boy and cannon.
Cannon boy, yeah.
I'm building 2 cannons, one of which is a naval cannon, on a naval mount. So, it could be useful, but I'm not sure your boat could handle the recoil.
Is it mountable and quick refill? Because we need that, because I'm not a very good aim.
That's all right. I'm a good aim. Anyway, Marcus, it's good to have you back on the Buddies again, and we'll look forward to hearing from you again in the future.
Cool. Talking about some other madness in 2024, no doubt.
No doubt. There'll be plenty more of it.
Good chat, mate.
Thanks, mate. See you. Welcome to Cam's Buddies, Jack. Good to have you back.
G'day, Cameron. That was quick.
I'm always.
Paul mustn't have been on.
You're old school. You would have sat up and watched the opening ceremony of the Olympics on the weekend.
Do you want me to lie, or do you want me to tell you exactly what I did?
Well, if you didn't watch it, that's all right. I didn't watch it.
Well, it was on, and my wife was watching it, and I have to admit, I love the French. I love France. My civil engineering background makes me shudder at their engineering ability when it comes to septic sewage, but that's another matter. But so I started watching this thing, and I started seeing, maybe I'm wrong, but I thought I saw lots of transvestites and people like that, and I thought, it's time I went and did some work for my other job, working for AdPlan. I got on my iPad and answered aviators' queries.
Yeah, well, you're right.
I haven't been of much use to you, I'm afraid.
It was full of trannies, and there's been an outrage over it. People are concerned that they were mocking, the depiction of Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper and mocking Christianity. You obviously caught a bit of a sneak preview on that. What's your view on that? Do you think it was just a bit of stupidness, or is it more deliberate?
I don't really know the answer to that until I knew that was going to be a topic, which I only found out about. I didn't do much research on it, and I'd have to think about that. But I'm old school, old-fashioned, and unfortunately none of all that so-called modern stuff rings my bell, I'm afraid to say. I'm very conservative, as you know.
Well, let's put it another way. Would you fly a French aeroplane?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they make the best planes in the world. There's no doubt about that.
Is it like their cars where they go faster in reverse, or their tanks?
Well, anytime you fly Air New Zealand out of here, you're flying on a French aeroplane. So,
this is true.
Flying to Australia or the islands.
What about helicopters?
No, they make wonderful aeroplanes. The A380, which I know is sort of probably too big for most people, it's the most wonderful aeroplane ever. It's brilliant. And once you've been on it, there's no other airplane that sort of can compare.
Yeah, I've done a few trips on A380s, and I have to say, just an amazing aircraft. But I think part of that was the fact that Emirates was flying it, and their service is absolutely exemplary. But you're right, even in cattle class in an A380, it's comfortable and you don't feel it all squashed in.
Well, I've never been anywhere else but in cattle class, so I concur with that.
Maybe you need a better job then.
Well, I'm working hard, but it's pretty hard at my time of life. As my daughter said to me, because I only had a fixed-wing aircraft and not a helicopter, I was a loser. So I've resigned myself to the fact that I'm a loser.
Yeah, well, kids say stupid things sometimes. How's she going with her bed out in the garage?
It's been a bit... well, no, she's not. She's living with a boyfriend. He just became world champion in underwater hockey, a game that I hadn't even heard of until she met him, and they just won the world championship in Kuala Lumpur and beat Australia. And I don't care what sport it is. Anytime we beat Australia, man, I am happy.
I'm with you on that. I've never really worked out water polo. I mean, how do you get all the horses to swim like that in the pool? It must be bloody hard.
Well, of course, I've never seen it before. And there it was on sort of a live feed, which was terribly done. Malaysians need a bit of tuition on that. But having said that, it was very interesting. Man, New Zealand really scored well. I mean, that's the second time my future son-in-law, if it goes that far, has been a world champion, which is very meritorious.
Well, he sounds like
I haven't been a world champion.
Sounds like a bang-up sort of a fella. Maybe you should take him aerobatics and see the measure of the bloke.
Well, he's British, so straight away he's in favour with me.
Mind you, it's better than being French.
I don't know about that. France is probably one of my favourite, if not my favourite, country on earth. I love it there. They like the way of life, food. I just like the French.
Oh, well, no complaints from you then. The trannies.
Well, yeah, but you were talking about something else. I mean, you're talking about an event that was staged by, I don't know, people in France, no doubt, but I wonder if all the French actually thought that was good. The one thing good about it was I think that all the public could see the event rather than being in a stadium where only those that paid to go in could see it.
Well, it's the wonders of television, isn't it?
I don't know. Oh, exactly. But Anyway, I didn't watch it for very long, as I said, because I'm old-fashioned and it didn't appeal to me at all. But others have raved about it.
I didn't watch it at all because I can't be bothered.
Yeah. Well, I'm probably in your camp, I'm afraid, Cameron.
No, well,
we're both losers then.
No, well, there's no way I'm a loser, so you can't be a loser either, Jack.
My daughter said I was.
Well, yeah, she can sleep in the garage. Not a problem. Problem solved.
Yeah, retribution.
Well, that's
Fine.
old-fashioned,
Yeah.
isn't it? Disrespect your
It is.
kid. Find somewhere else to sleep. Easy fixed.
I mean, my standard answer to anyone that misbehaves is that they need a thrashing, but apparently I'm not allowed to say that anymore. Damn it.
Well,
Keep
you're
being
not allowed to
correct.
say it, and you're
Can't
not allowed
say
to do
that. Look, we're going off topic, but what really gets me is the youth today, and I employ enough of them, their work ethic is not the same as it used to be. I think that we should have compulsory military training. They need to go through, an army school to teach them how to do stuff.
Caned. You know, when I caused trouble at school, which was almost every day because school was boring for me, I'd get told by the teacher, go and find a cane. I never managed to find one, but they gave me stupid instructions, so they got stupid results. But if I did find a cane, then they would have given me 6 of the best and told me to mind my P's and Q's. And when they stopped corporal punishment, I think that's when society started falling down.
Oh, absolutely. And you're not a bad person, and your definition of bad, I would imagine, is nothing compared with what's bad today. For example, I wasn't bad either, but I still got 37 strokes of the cane in the 3rd form at Marlborough College.
Oh, I had one teacher, my economics teacher. His name was Mr. Forder. Paul Forder is now and does something in business in economics. He said to me, Slater, if I hear your voice one more time, I'm going to cane you. And I said, sir, if you tried to cane me, I'll laugh in your face. And that was the end of that discussion.
I had red raw buttocks for months on end.
Oh, you must be a slow learner then.
They had this kind of cane. The teachers will go out and get the right type of wood for these canes. Man, they cut you bad. We used to put our cap in our pocket so that the whiplash, as the canes whipped around your buttocks, that's where it will cut the most. And we'd put a cap in there. And if they saw you had a cap in there, they'd make you take it out and give you another stroke.
Well, I had a teacher, Bob Hunt, and he started off the year the same way for every class. He said, right, everyone line up outside. You're all going to get a stroke of the cane so you know what it feels like if you don't do your homework. And so, all of us bigger boys, we would push all of the little weedy boys to the front of the queue so that, he hadn't tired himself quite so much as he was walloping them. And then after he got through about 10 of them, he'd call out, the one at the back gets 6. And so we'd be pushing all the little guys to the back of the line then.
I'm a firm believer in corporal punishment. I think it's the biggest mistake ever to stop it.
Well, we wouldn't.
I think a lot of these hoodlums of today might be a little bit better behaved if they knew they were going to get a whack. And it's the same in the police. We were in fear of policemen. It's not that we didn't like them. We were in fear of, first of all, getting a kick up the butt if you did something wrong, like riding your bicycle through a park or something. Yeah. But the biggest fear was they'd say, I know your name and I'm going to tell your father. And then you get a right hiding after that.
Well, my father always said to me, if I ever got the cane at school, I'd get it again when I got home. So he never told me I got the cane. It's really simple.
Yeah. We survived.
We digress. But thanks for your call, Jack.
Dude, how the hell did we digress into all of that rubbish?
Oh, because it's my show and I can do what I want.
That's true. Good on you. Excellent.
All right, we'll talk again next week, Jack.
Nice talking to you. See you, Cam.
See ya. Welcome to Cam's Buddies, Jimmy. How are you?
G'day. Very well this week, mate. I'm full of energy. How about you, sir?
Yeah, I'm the same. Good to be back in my usual slot, though. It was a bit of a a bit of a eye-opener getting up early in the morning to run the breakfast takeover. But anyway, we have to do these things sometimes.
Now, what are you talking about this week, Mr. Slater?
Did you watch the opening ceremony of the Olympics? And if you did, what did you think? And if you did, have you seen about the reaction about it?
I didn't watch it. I was going to watch it on record, and then I saw highlights of it, so I proceeded to not watch it because it's just more of the same in the West. The decline, the woke virtual signalling, the stuff we talk about all the time. It's just infested everywhere. Why on earth would they do that to the opening of the Olympics? Why?
Well, I think they just wanted to put it in Christian eyes, I think.
I know, 2 billion people, right? It just, the Olympics are supposed to be about lifting up and success and celebrating. Instead, they're trying to bring people down. It's in virtual signal to a real small amount of people. It's just more madness. The longer the timeline goes, the more craziness we see all the time, everywhere. It's insane.
So many things that the French have got to be proud of. They could have celebrated, I don't know, some of their inventors. They could have celebrated some of their famous artists. They could have celebrated their famous architects, some of the famous people in history like Rollo, the Duke of Normandy, for example, or even William the Bastard, who was William the Conqueror, who went on to conquer the British crown. They could have put all of those sorts of things, but no, they had to do, a Lovey's version, trans version of the Last Supper with a big fat tranny as Jesus.
Well, maybe they're trying to celebrate their food a little bit. I don't know. It's just all very bizarre. But they've seen it like a 26% drop in viewership in the Olympics. So, as you know, go woke, go broke. It's happening.
Yeah, it's happening. Let it happen, I guess.
When are we going to see a kickback? When are we going to see someone come out and just not do that?
Well,
at a big public event.
What I really want to see is if we're going to have all these freaks like blokes who think they're Sheilas, in the boxing or weightlifting or whatever, why don't we just have a freak Olympics where you can take whatever drugs you want, you can, wear whatever suit or clothes that you want, you can pretend whoever you want to be, but you're only going to fight or compete against other similarly, weirdo people. But, I want to see somebody, some bloke probably, run 100 meters in 2.5 seconds, juiced up to the max. He'll probably die at the finishing line, but I want to see it, instead of this.
Yeah, or someone lift 500 kilos.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, that would be awesome. I've been talking about that for years with people, just an open, unlimited, non-drug tested Olympic dope Olympics.
Yeah.
I'm surprised a private company in the US hasn't gone with it and run it on a smaller scale, just at a few events. Because imagine just have a female and male category just open. There's no other weight kilos. Just go for it. Imagine it. Make people very wealthy. Because the viewership would be there. Maybe we should start it in New Zealand. You should start it, Cam. You've got a website.
Well, maybe Dana White should do it. I mean, or the guys from, the WWE or F or whatever it's called now, the wrestling, all of those guys are completely juiced freaks. All the ones that we looked at when we were kids, they're all dead now. None of them lasted past 40. But, it was a spectacle. It was entertaining. And I think if we had an Olympics that was with all these juiced athletes, and we could see all these spectacular feats happening, we were sitting there going, wow, that's just incredible. It would make more money than the Olympics itself, I think.
Oh, it 100% would, because you could easily commercialise it, and you wouldn't have to have such fair rules and testing, and just be, and also it'd get rid of the by birth you inherit some sort of genetic freak talent like Usain Bolt had, whereas some average Joe can just train and juice himself to become like that. So you get a much wider spread of people entering. It's not going to limit. I suppose it's pretty expensive to be fair.
At the end of his natural, right, with his natural DNA genetic, benefits, And then he decides that in the twilight of his career for certain events, he's going to juice himself. And then he'll be Super Usain Bolt, who will be just smoking everybody, because not only has he got genetic benefits, now he's juiced as well. I mean, it would be incredible.
You sound like Rory Whiteley, people with genetic benefits, Cam.
Yeah, he looks like his DNA was reefed out of the cooking pot from the bottom.
Yeah, well, that's like, I guess that's what we've got to avoid talking about. But
so I think much of the opening ceremony, and it's all go woke, go broke for you, and that's all she wrote.
Yeah, to be honest, I haven't watched any Olympics since then because I'm just not interested in it anymore. I just can't be bothered with it. And it's such a shame for all those young athletes who trained like that. But I know a lot of people have gone right off it now. I've got some Catholic friends who are boycotting it. So they're just going to read what they say.
Did you see the two blokes who thought that they were Sheila's in the boxing got a height from the girls?
Yeah. Oh, did they?
I mean,
they're even more pathetic.
I was sitting there thinking, hang on, you guys were pathetic boxers as males, so you decided to become, females. Stuff had the headline "Female boxers, okay to compete," and they both got a hiding from actual females, which I thought was absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, well, that happened to Female of the Year in 2020, Laurel Hubbard. She got his ass kicked in the female weightlifting category at Tokyo, didn't she?
Yeah.
So they're not just losers in the male category. They're just losers in sport, and they're trying to cheat their way into attention-seeking situations. And it's good to see them losing. It's good to see the females prosper over them. It's awesome.
Yeah. Exactly.
In fact, I might have to go and watch some of that boxing.
Well, look for the replays of the blokes hiding from the Sheilas.
Okay, Cam, that's awesome.
All right. Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks for calling Cam's Buddies.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Bye. It's always amazing to see what the person on the street thinks, and today was no different. Now, as a Christian, I was not offended, but I can understand how many might be. But here's the thing. There haven't been any riots in the street, cars set on fire, or random beheadings of people involved, have there? I guess that just goes to show that while Christians may be mad, they are at least tolerant. Tell us your thoughts on Cam's Buddies by emailing inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
You're listening to The Crunch with Cam Slater, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.
And now it's time for the whale bag. And it's a bumper whale bag today. Plenty of feedback, so let's get into it. Some general feedback from Surma. Riveting, you're doing such an amazing job with all of the guests, building connections and trust, not only with them, but with us, the listeners. I literally weep sometimes listening to RCR, surprising myself. Realizing the accumulated anguish of being a helpless outcast, realizing that very clever, experienced and knowledgeable people such as your guests and hosts express what I feel deeply is such a relief. Thank you. Keep the good work going. James writes and says, great show, Cam, and always great content with all your guests. Great that you are on and part of RCR with all your invaluable knowledge and experience. Now, Jan writes about my monologue. He says, you hit the nail on the head with your views on this bloated bureaucracy, but let's not forget, where there is smoke, there is usually fire. Housing New Zealand is another example where the bureaucracy is out of control and Chris Bishop has done the right thing by showing them the door. But the PM can't stop there. All these cost overruns are on borrowed or printed money, and unless we rope it in, we're going down the gurgler. You cannot spend money you haven't got without some severe consequences. We all know that, and it's time for the government to have a reality check. Now, Morris Williamson dropped in to share his perspective on the turmoil of the US election, as well as his views on Auckland roads. And somebody writes and says, what's the dollar value of each cone and who owns the company? Well, those are very good questions. And Simon Lusk shared his insights in the current state of the US election race and reviewed current polls. And somebody said, can you please explain how the Electoral College votes work, please? And I will be doing that with a chat with Marie next week. Excellent interview with Simon Cam, really insightful from Maud. And Steve writes, says, hi Cam, interesting interview with Simon Lusk, but have you two grand old men of the New Zealand political commentariat ever heard of RFK Jr., or is he just fake news? Well, Steve, if you tune in to Marie Buskey's show next week, you can hear her and I talk about Robert Kennedy and his chances, such as they are. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about US elections and why New Zealanders always seem to fail to understand what's going on over there. Now, Olivia's view was on the Trump assassination attempt. We replayed that from the 18th of July for the breakfast takeover. We've got an anonymous comment. Brilliant, Olivia. Kingsley writes, on all morning and no mention of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He exists, are you oblivious? No, Kingsley, we're not oblivious. We just know what reality is. But listen to the Marie Buskey show next week with her and I talking about exactly this. Anonymous comment says, Olivia, you are absolutely beautiful. Thank you so very much for sharing exactly what is going on about Donald Trump. You made me so proud. Thank you. Thank you. Bless all of us, the many. Jen writes and says, after hearing Olivia on your breakfast slot, I think she makes a lot of sense. What I'm puzzled by is why Bobby Kennedy Jr. gets very little attention. Well, Jen, he gets very little attention because he has no chance of winning, and I'll explain that next week on Marie's show. Ross writes and says, I love Olivia's point of view. For me, she resonates common sense mixed with deep insights that anyone with open eyes can understand. Anonymous comment says, I greatly appreciate Olivia's deeply researched point of view. Thank you for helping me stay well informed. Chrissy writes and says, I'm replying to Olivia's dialogue re Donald Trump. I've listened to it twice now and couldn't agree more. It's so transparent what is transpiring in New Zealand in US politics. I believe anyone who cannot see it for what it is programmed. Ultra is a thing. MSM and Hollywood are dumbing down and programming the masses. I love you, Olivia. Thank you for your views. Alice writes and says, RCR seems to forget Kennedy is also in the race for the US presidency. I'd love to see a debate between Trump, Kennedy, and Harris. Frustrated to see your continued sidelining of RFK. He's a huge force of truth committed to dismantling the corruption running through the regulatory agencies and military-industrial complex. What is there not to like about him? And Alice, for you need to listen to Marie and I discuss exactly why RFK is not going to get there. You'll find out, and history is against him. Tracy writes, Cam and Olivia, massive as always. I have a fear that if America falls, votes Democrat, the rest of the so-called West is in serious trouble. We could see Taiwan invaded, and in 5 or so years, we may feel the might of the PLA. I see here in New Zealand, the government is considering, if not pushing vaccine mandates, home detention, house arrest, travel restrictions as part of any future pandemic response. We voted these people in to reject the tyranny of that Marxist jihadi that was Ardern, yet the ideology just marches on. Now, Cam's buddies dialed in and tell us what they thought about the sacking of the Health New Zealand board after multi-million-dollar shortfalls each month. Fiona writes and says, what became of Andrew Little? How can these miscreants walk away with no consequences for their complicity and malfeasance, which became the norm under the despotic Ardern and seems to be no change with the Coalition Party now? The latest July 2024 pandemic plan is yet another example of the abuse of power, the abrogation of human and medical rights. Anonymous comment says, my GP closed her clinic. There were some ethical doctors, however. I've now been waiting 2 months for a new doctor's appointment. Lucky I'm not jabbed. Yeah, question every little prick. Rosa writes and says 2,500 managers, and they've put a ban on employing any agency staff for the last 3 months. And Glenn says, I've heard from several people recently that COVID jam mandates still exist at university medical schools in New Zealand, apparently for all disciplines, e.g. physiotherapy, psychology, and all the others from the second year. I know some very bright people, young people who would otherwise have gone into medicine but will now take a different direction. This mandate issue ensures the best and the brightest will not be in our medical system in the future. Ross writes and says, hi Cam, my wife is a homeopath and saved my life when my kidneys failed. Long story, but that's the short of it. And Andrew says, I enjoyed Cam's Buddies this morning. Good to hear about alternative health. I used homeopathy years ago and good ones are life-changing. And Kirsty writes and says, I really enjoyed Cam's show this week and the discussion about health. We need more conversations about alternative medicine. Keep up the good work. We got some negative feedback for the buddies. This is a stand-up day. Okie dokie, Cam. Normally your interviews are on point, but Cam's buddies not so. It's just 5 or is it 6 people and yourself covering exactly the same topic, saying exactly the same thing. Rinse and repeat each week depending on the topic. Just a suggestion, time to change that focus. It's very, very boring. Well, thank you for that comment. I'm glad you listened. And now for my feedback on my selection of replays from the second part of the Crunch Breakfast Takeover. Malcolm Roberts it was one of the interviews that I chose on the changing dynamics in Australian politics and his ongoing battle against globalist organisations. And Dave not Dave, this was an anonymous comment. I follow Malcolm Roberts on Facebook. It's wonderful to hear him on RCR. Interesting about the teals. Shills are everywhere. Thanks, Cam, from another political tragic. Dave writes and says, our coal is the best and cleanest burning in the world. It is sought after for making the best of steels. It's all a crock. The ETS and climate change BS is choking all the Western economies while China profits off this fraudulent rhetoric. Large corporates, BlackRock, etc., in Western economies support this because they have massive investments in China. So these ultra-rich, I refuse to call them elites like some do, also profit massively from this. And Donna writes and says, I thoroughly enjoyed your interview with Senator Roberts, a true blue Aussie who calls a spade, or perhaps a bloody shovel. I liked his summing up of both our country's two-party system as two cheeks of the same arsehole. I was brought up to abhor swearing, but at age 81, I find myself letting fly more and more. Let's have more bloody shovels. Liz writes and says, a brilliant conversation with Aussie Senator Malcolm Roberts this morning, full of truth with facts and reasons regarding natural resources like coal and hydro dams, which are the most productive, cleanest and cheapest form of energy for the New Zealand public. Yet we have the deceit of politicians who block the use of clean New Zealand coal, which they falsely call a climate change danger. Our wonderful New Zealand coal is then sent to China and we import filthy rubbish coal from Indonesia. I find this deliberate deception as treasonous behaviour from politicians who are continuing to bankrupt our beautiful New Zealand. It seems to me that mainstream media is a drug that destroys, used by politicians who do not work for the benefit of our country and paid for us by the taxpayers. Wake up, people. Keep up your good work, Cam. Simon Anderson was another interview that I chose, a citizen journalist and currently in the media landscape. Donna writes and says, interesting discussion on the MSM, misery, media, propaganda and the Public Interest Journalism Fund, bribery indeed. But RCR has to be careful not to be so enthusiastically championing one side like Trumpists. Please remember that you're supposed to allow all sides of an issue fair airtime. Not all of us agree that Trump is the saviour of the world. Personally, I think he's an incompetent sleazeball, and now there's evidence that the deep state has decided to back him. Corruption runs deep. Open your eyes and mind to other opinions, not just hero worshipping on one side. Otherwise, certain members of your audience will desert RCR too. Cuts both ways. Balance is the key. P.S. Release the ferret. Anonymous comment to the people harmed by a biased justice system. Add the people of New Zealand who watch justice in their country descend into a sham. And now I also had a replay from Nathan Smith, who shared his experience of being cancelled by the New Zealand Initiative. Plus, he discussed the problems with New Zealand media and how to change policy agenda. Rowan, anonymous comment says, Virology 101 teaches that it is a big mistake to try and vaccinate in the middle of a pandemic. It should never be done. And what a great interview. So much to take away from that conversation. Keep going. So great to know my money is well spent. And finally, to wrap up the whale bag for this week, I've received a message from Tracy regarding Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Here we go. I'm an avid listener, fan and supporter of RCR and your hosts. Amazing work. Thank you. Lately, I've listened to a lot of political commentary from many hosts, especially on the American political situation, Democrat/Biden versus Republican/Trump. What's sadly and sorely missing is much mention or conversation about independent candidate Robert Kennedy Jr. I expect the MSM not to mention him, that's a given. But I thought and hoped that RCR hosts would mention this great human being fighting for so much of what our freedom and truth community value, strive for and believe in. I've followed RFK Jr. for many years because of his fight against corrupt corporations, vaccine injuries and harm. During the COVID pandemic, he really put his head high above the parapet, speaking out loudly against much of the BS. And now, incredibly, he's bravely and courageously running as an independent in spite of the horrific murders and tragedy his family have endured. Even if he doesn't stand a chance of winning due to the usual red-blue game being played out, please honour this amazing man. I implore your hosts to spend some time on his Facebook page, the Children's Health Defence and Defender web pages, to better understand what he is about. He is a hero of our crazy time. Thank you kindly. Love and light, Trace. And that's the whale bag for this week. Right, that's it for the Crunch this week. It's good to be back in my usual slot. I found my chat with Dr. Marewa Glover fascinating and revealing at the same time. Imagine being the most prominent researcher in your field, and because you follow the science and not the propaganda, you then find yourself offside with other public health advocates and ultimately blacklisted and cancelled. Meanwhile, her expertise is sought after all around the world despite her cancellation in New Zealand. And I've found that if someone is being cancelled, then it usually pays to listen to what they have to say. And that's why we're here at The Crunch on Reality Check Radio to get you the in-depth takes that you need. Now, you can keep up with all my shows and indeed every host's shows by using the RCR app, and you can even use the app to stream live. And a big thanks to all the team in the background that helped put together the show and make it all work. It's been a real pleasure having you all back this week. I'm loving all your feedback. It was a bumper whale bag this week, and I'm really enjoying talking to so many people, sharing their thoughts on politics, life, policy, and everything in between. So a big shout out to all of you. Thank you for listening and having faith in me as we continue to explore this beautiful game of politics. Don't forget, email suggestions to inbox@realitycheck.radio, and let's make this show the best political show in New Zealand. Stay tuned for a repeat of Rodney Hyde's Real Talk coming up next, followed by a replay of Truth Speaker with Tobias Tahi. And finally, to finish, a song from an amazing singer, Teddy Swims. It's called Amazing. All these songs are in the Crunch playlist on Spotify, so go find them and enjoy. And I'm looking forward to having you join me again next week for The Crunch with Cam Slater.
You've been listening to The Crunch with Cam Slater. Remember, you can check out the replays for today's show on our website at www.realitycheck.radio/replays. Tune in every Thursday at 4 p.m. for more with Cam Slater, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.